In this video, I'm going to be talking about how to fit the 4-dart sloper mock-up. Reminding you, the 4-dart sloper is one where the shoulder dart goes to the apex on the front, the bust apex, and this one has a waist dart. So there are 2 darts. The darts can go from other places, but this is a standard placement. And then on the back, there's a shoulder dart also to the apex here. This shoulder blade area is considered the apex in the back. And it's a more general apex than the very specific apex on the front, the bust apex. The second dart on the back goes from the waist up. So there are our 4 darts, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because we pattern on the half, this represents half of a bodice, we call it the 4-dart sloper pattern, but of course when we cut it out of muslin to fit it around the total circumference of the body, you'll end up with 8 darts, and we'll see that next. So here we have the muslin mock-up on Sarah, who's helping us today by being our model. And the darts, again, are from the shoulder to the bust apex, and then from the waist to the bust apex. And can you turn your back to the camera? And then here we have the shoulder dart going to this shoulder blade area, and then the waist dart coming up, giving room and ease to the shoulder blade area. To start fitting the muslin mock-up, you can see that there are a lot of bumps and extra drag lines and so forth. We're going to be clipping into the seam allowance and clipping into the armscye seam allowance and the waist in order to get that to settle on the form. You might find that you need to clip into the neckline and the armscye first before you can even match up the center back lines to have them meet in order to pin that closed. On this mock-up, I've stay stitched the neckline, armscye, waist, and center backs in black in the hope that you can see it better. As you can see, the center backs are not meeting yet, but that's because we haven't clipped into the neck and the armscye, which I'll do next. We need to take a moment at this point and talk about geometry. This is the pattern, and here is the muslin front. You can see the 2 shoulder darts pointing to the apex and the 2 waist darts. I've darkened the lines with Sharpie so that you can see them. So let's look at this neckline. I patterned the actual seam line to fit Sarah's neck, but we need to cut seam allowance in to stitch and to have extra in case I've gone off and I need to mark in a little. But what that means is that the cut edge, this inner circle, is a shorter line than the actual neckline that I intend to end up with. And so what that means is that this is a smaller circumference than Sarah's neck, which is what this should be with a little bit of ease. So when I put this mock-up on her, the neck and the armscye deliberately, we already know, won't fit unless we start clipping into the seam allowance on her, which allows the muslin to expand or spread out this way, and so that we can get to the actual seam line at her actual neck. Now, why don't we start there to begin with? Well, because, as I said, if I'm slightly off, maybe I'm only going to be clipping part way into the seam allowance, and then this is her actual neckline. So this is geometry, and this is why when we first put the muslin mock-up on Sarah, it may not fit at center back until we clip the armscye, clip the neck, so that the muslin mock-up can settle around her torso. So back to the fitting of the mock-up on Sarah, you can see that the 2 center back lines aren't matching at all. So I'm going to have her turn around, face the camera if you would, and we're going to start clipping into the neckline, armscye seam allowance to get this mock-up to settle, and then it will meet in the back. When I do the clipping, I always have my fingers between the scissor tip and the actor or the client. You prefer that, don't you?
I sure do.
I'm clipping down to the line, and here I might clip part way to the line until I get it clipped a little more, and then test to see if the center back will meet. So I'm going to do some clipping to settle this. Once you have the neckline clipped, you can give the bodice a tug, and you can see already that it's smoothing out nicely. These lines here, so I start at the neck to start at the top, clip, smooth down, clip in the arm's eye, smooth down, and clip the waist. So starting at the top, this has been clipped. So you can see here that there are folds into the arm's eye. If there are drag lines or folds like this, it indicates that there's a problem in the fit right here. And it's very handy, the drag lines point at the spot where the trouble is. And so you would come here, and again, 2 fingers between you and your client, and start clipping into the arm's eye seam allowance. Once you have the front of the arm's eye clipped, you'll need to ask the client to move your arm slightly forward and clip the back of the arm's eye. And you may even need to ask them to lift up a little bit. You don't want them to raise their arm too much because we don't want to disturb the plane of the shoulder. That would lift the mock-up and distort the fit. And so we just ask them to lift their arm, and sometimes I put my hand here to remind them to keep their shoulder down. So now that I've clipped into the arm's eye on both sides, we can see that this is settling nicely. There's still a little air space here, so I'm going to want to clip into that a little more. But before I do that, I want to pin the center back. Turn your back to me. And maybe a little 3/4. That's great. So now we can see that the center back seams do in fact line up, and I'll pin that next. In pinning the center back, it would be very tempting to have the seam allowance at center back stick out like this and pin that. It creates a large fin down the back, and it inhibits the designer's ability to look to see if that back is lying smoothly. So what you really want to do, or what I prefer to do, is lap under one side and then fold back the other so that we have a nice clean line to pin down this center back. When you're doing that pinning at center back, take a bite with the pin of the fold and then come over and pick up a bite of the underneath and pin that way. It's very, very smooth and provides a nice clean look. When you're clipping the back neck, make sure to clean out and lift up all the hair of your client. Haircuts we schedule at a different time in the process, and I don't do haircuts in the fitting here. Once you have the mock-up pinned at center back, it's a good time to just take a step back and look at the overall picture. Is the neck sitting in a good spot? Are the arm's eyes? Where are the excess drag lines or excess fabric? I can see that I need to clip a little more here in the arm's eye to deepen that arm's eye, because that will make this fabric then come out and smooth there. Take a step back, look at the waist, see if the waistline is in the right spot. I'm going to turn the side to them, and can you just lift your arm like this? It's great to take a look and see if the side seam is looking like it's actually on the side seam of the torso, and your arm down. And then you can look at the arm's eye and the shoulder to see if that seam is falling off the shoulder or in too far that way. And then your back this way. And make sure that the center back is truly falling down the center of the spine that way. Check the back waist as well. Some people's waistlines are higher in back or higher in the front, and so you may need to remark the waistline going all the way around. If you find that as you're trying to pin the center back, it won't meet, let out the side seams. The reason I like to let out the side seam is that the side seam being let out is let out equally on the front and the back, and that preserves the balance front to back of the garment. Go ahead and put your arm down. If you only let out the garment on the back, you're only expanding the back. You're not doing anything to increase the circumference around the front. So I like to build in alterability and fitability at the side seam. So now that I've clipped the neck and the arm's eyes, both of them, you can see the bodice is fitting much more smoothly. Sometimes it's difficult to know just exactly where that arm's eye is. Essentially, what you're wanting, I'm going to peel this away, essentially you're aiming for this portion right here where the arm is leaving the torso. That's the arm's eye, and then it goes straight up to the top of the shoulder and then down to the back again. And sometimes you can see that a little more easily if you lay a 1/4 inch twill tape here and take a look at that as you're having your client face the mirror, and then you can look into the mirror at the client, and then you can see if this is heading nicely straight up, or if maybe you've angled out too much, or you've gotten in something like this. It's a great little visual to see what is proportionally pleasing to find that arm's eye. Another good use for the twill tape is to take a look at the angle your dart is making. The darts can be angled anywhere, up to the neck, to the mid-shoulder, or out further. And if you think that maybe something like this is a little more pleasing, then what you can do is simply draw in with your pencil and make a note to end up at the bust apex, and you can shift your dart that way. You can also use the twill tape to find a more pleasing waistline. If the designer is wanting to go high-waisted, this is a higher-waisted. This is an easy way to look at that before you start drawing lines all over your mock-up. If you find that you want to shorten or indicate a lengthening of the dart, you can simply measure and take a note, or draw a horizontal line and make a note to taper to that line. Be cautious about what I call overfitting. You don't want this garment to be skin tight because the actor will not be able to move. And so while it might be tempting to pin out a good deal of this extra fabric here, you might wait until you are in the real fabric for the second fitting to just slim in the side seam a little bit more. If you find that you have a good deal of extra someplace, for example here, what you can do is rip out the seam and shift this up and deepen this dart. So I've ripped open this shoulder seam and this back dart. What I'm going to do is deepen the amount of this dart, and take this amount, this extra here, and shift it up into that dart, deepening that dart. And what that does is smooths out this area so we don't have that excess here. Again, you don't want to overfit that, because as the actor moves, they're going to need some of that. But this is another way to get a little nicer fit in this area. So here I've shifted some of this excess fullness into a deeper shoulder dart and re-pinned on the seam line here. And you can see that moving this over, deepening that dart, has shifted the arm's eye. So I'm going to simply redraw that, cross out the old line as a note to myself that this is the new line that we're wanting to blend with the front arm's eye. Once you've clipped everything and made any notations about placement of darts and so forth, then I like to lightly pencil in the arm's eye and any changes you might have made to the neck before we take this mock-up off, so that we don't lose any critical notations. And then you can take this off and then start the truing process on the table as I described in another video.